Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. So today we're going to be going over the nitrogen cycle. I decided to hold off because a lot of you seem to be struggling to catch up. So I know it's a bit of a struggle right now to get everything caught up. That's okay. I know it's been kind of a hectic start to the year. So for your interactive notebook, I will be doing just a 5-point check today. Or I checked some over the weekend. Going to be finishing up grades, putting those into the grade book. It's just 5 points. Don't freak out. But after you guys take your Unit 1 test, I'm going to ask you to turn everything in. And remember, your Unit 1 test is going to be this upcoming weekend. All right? So then it'll be worth more points. This was just a notebook check. Don't freak out. All right, so nitrogen cycle. Some things these memes are showing. Bacteria is bad in the nitrogen cycle. All right, so bacteria is very important in the nitrogen cycle. And one does not simply use nitrogen gas directly. Nitrogen gas is inert, which means it won't react. We can't use it. So that's part of the reason bacteria are so important. We got to use those bacteria to turn nitrogen gas into something we can actually use. All right, so remember, all of the matter cycles, the biogeochemical cycles, happen because of the law of conservation of mass, which says matter cannot be created or destroyed, which means matter is just going to continuously cycle within an environment. There are some pretty crazy implications for this. So the carbon that makes you up probably was in a dinosaur. The nitrogen that's in your bones was probably at one point in another living organism. So all the atoms that make you up were at one point in a different organism. We get most of these from what we eat. So literally, you are what you eat. All those atoms become you. Pretty crazy. All right, so I've seen a lot of struggle with the vocabulary term reservoir. So remember, a reservoir is a pool that contains the chemical that we're talking about. So for the water cycle, some reservoirs are like the ocean, plants, the atmosphere. Those all store the chemical in question. For the nitrogen cycle, the largest reservoir is the atmosphere. Pretty crazy. All right, so reservoirs store the chemical. All right, so let's quickly go over the carbon cycle. So our largest sink for carbon is going to be sedimentary rock. All right, so we have a lot that starts here in the atmosphere. This is going to be as carbon dioxide. As we know, plants are going to take carbon dioxide out of the air and through photosynthesis, turn it into glucose. So land plants store a lot of carbon. This was the New York Times article I was telling you guys to read. Trees are carbon sinks. They store carbon. They take it literally out of the air and store it. So if we start making buildings out of wood, we'll be creating more and more carbon sinks, which could potentially help with climate change. So from the land plants, we're going to eat the plants, and we're going to get the carbon from the plants. Then we're going to go through cellular respiration and breathe out carbon dioxide, and that's going to go back up to the atmosphere. Remember, plants also go through cellular respiration, so that's going to go back to the atmosphere as well. Eventually, us and the plants are going to die. We're going to decompose, and those bacteria are going to turn us into carbon in the soil. Eventually, over time, with pressure, our carbon can become fossil fuels. When we extract that fossil fuel and burn it, we're adding even more CO2 to the atmosphere than what should be there. Remember, a long time ago, we used to not do this, which is why climate change is happening. There are some volcanoes that can cause CO2 to enter the atmosphere. Another big flux arrow, from the atmosphere into the ocean. It's called the ocean atmosphere exchange. So our oceans are another big sink for carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide is acidic. And so when the carbon dioxide gets absorbed into the ocean, it actually lowers the ocean's pH and makes it more acidic, which is part of the reason why we're seeing massive coral die-offs. Pretty crazy. All right, so once we're in the ocean, we also have, we have aquatic producers, and they're going to use the CO2 from the atmosphere to go through photosynthesis. It's going to go to the consumers. It's going to have some respiration back up into the atmosphere, and then it's going to decompose. Eventually, because of burial, it's going to become sedimentary rock. Over time, that becomes fossil fuels. All right, and that is pretty much the carbon cycle. Take a second. I want you guys to answer in the comments, how have humans affected the carbon cycle? All right, so the big one, burning fossil fuels. We are causing climate change. All right, so intro to the nitrogen cycle. The largest reservoir and sink for nitrogen is the atmosphere. So this is a little graphic about all the different gases in our atmosphere. Nitrogen is the largest gas. Most of our atmosphere is nitrogen. 78% is nitrogen, 20% is oxygen, and the other little baby tiny bit is all of these other gases over here. So nitrogen is the most abundant, but it's in the air as N2, which means it's inert. It will not readily react with things. We can't just and then absorb all that nitrogen. We're just going to inhale it in and breathe it right back out. So bacteria are going to play a very important role in turning this N2 into stuff that we can actually use. So back in about the 1900s, scientists realized that nitrogen helps plants grow. The more nitrogen there was in the soil, the more the plants grew. So in 1909, there were these two German scientists, Fritz Haber, Karl Bosch, and they figured out how to take gaseous nitrogen, previously inert N2, out of the atmosphere and turn it into fertilizer. So they're basically doing the same thing that bacteria are doing. It's called the Haber-Bosch process, and there's going to be a lot of consequences. So this is going to usher in the modern day fertilizer. So basically they take the nitrogen out of the atmosphere, turn it into fertilizer, and put it over fields. Has some good consequences, more plant growth, more food. That's good. Has a lot of bad stuff though. So all of the stuff that they put on to the crops, it's going to run off into bodies of water and cause this thing called eutrophication, which we'll talk about tomorrow. It also has some air pollution. So nitrogen oxides, or we'll call them NOxes, nitrogen oxides, NOx. NOxes cause very serious air pollution and are bad to breathe in. And then also infiltration. So remember, infiltration is when water goes down into groundwater. Remember, we drink groundwater. So if that nitrogen gets down into the groundwater, the nitrates, and we drink it, it's bad for us. So we can also get hurt that way. All right, interactive notebook time. So you're going to construct the great circle of life by reading the passage and filling in the diagram with just reservoir names. So I'm not asking you to do flux arrows this time. So this one is very confusing. So you're just doing the reservoir names. All right, and I give you a word bank here. Remember, these are in your textbook, but if the first thing you should do is read through the nitrogen cycle and then come back and fill this in. All right, I think that's it. Have an amazing day, and I will see you all, some of you today, and some of you tomorrow, and some of you Wednesday. Bye, guys.